Tracy thought I was out of the loop. She figured I hadn't caught on to her affair with Michael, her coworker. She must have believed I was blind or too naive to notice the signs. She thought I'd just sit back while she had her fun, expecting me to be oblivious to the fact she was sleeping with him. She had another thing coming. I've been suspicious for a long time. She was spending more time away from home, staying up late, and dressing in a more revealing way. She also seemed to be interested in sexier outfits. Our intimacy had become more intense, but she was also becoming emotionally distant and no longer interested in the things we used to enjoy together. I tried to address it more than once, but she brushed off my concerns. Tracy was good at denial, chalking everything up to my insecurities and saying I was overthinking things, but I wasn't about to let it go. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. I refused to stay in the dark. I was convinced I wouldn't let my wife betray me like that. I'd been clear from day one, infidelity was a deal breaker. I told her this before we got married and over the course of 10 years, I never let her forget it. So, sitting in Peter Gibson's office, I had mixed emotions as I listened to his report. At first, I felt relief. He said she hadn't cheated yet. But then he said it was only a matter of time. Tracy and Michael were what they called work spouses. That made my stomach turned. She had only one spouse, me. Others might laugh it off or think it was harmless, but for me, it meant only one thing: betrayal. As it turned out, that's exactly what it was. They hadn't crossed the line physically yet, but the emotional connection was all too real. They had lunch together every day, always just the two of them. Gibson showed me pictures of them, holding hands, sitting close, hugging, even stealing a few kisses. I was furious. Michael looked proud of himself in those pictures. They'd also been working late together, more often than made sense. It seemed like they were making excuses just to avoid going home to their spouses. Gibson had even managed to trace some. I knew that some of Tracy's emails and texts were not exactly legal, but I didn't care. I wasn't planning on using them in court. Divorce laws around here are tricky, and no-fault divorces are easier anyway. I just wanted the truth for myself. However, Gibson wouldn't show me the messages directly, he only gave me a summary. According to him, Tracy never spoke badly about me, although Michael did try to get her to, but she didn't let him. Their messages were romantic, but they didn't explicitly say they were in love. Things had started to get more sexual, almost like foreplay through text. Michael had sent her pictures of himself, which she seemed to enjoy, and she'd responded by sending him some risque shots of her own, nothing too graphic. But the direction was clear. The worst news came next. Michael's wife was going out of town for 3 days. They decided this was their chance to finally sleep together. The only thing standing in their way was me. They were brainstorming ways to make it happen. At one point, Tracy had considered telling me she was going on a girls' weekend. But she figured I'd check with her friends. They even thought about pressuring me to go on a golf trip. I laughed bitterly, remembering how Tracy had casually suggested I plan a guy weekend. I shrugged it off, which killed that plan in the end. They landed on something more audacious. Michael had convinced Tracy that I'd allow her to sleep with him. He believed it. I'd be so eager to keep her happy that I'd go along with it. Somehow, he got her to believe that sleeping with him would actually improve our marriage. Clearly, they didn't know me, but what shocked me most was that Tracy seemed to buy into his nonsense. She should have known better. If she didn't, well, maybe she was more lost than I thought. Gibson finished his report, and I left with a heavy heart. I asked him to keep an eye on her and let me know if anything changed. On Friday, he called me with more news. Tracy was planning to come clean on Monday after work. She was going to sit me down and tell me she planned to go on a date with Michael. Dinner, dancing, and ending the night in a hotel room. She'd be back by Saturday or maybe Sunday, depending on how long they needed to get it out of their system. They rehearsed her whole speech, convinced I'd go along with it. She thought I'd be upset at first, but that I'd eventually agree, especially when she promised me sex afterward as a reward for my understanding. We hadn't had sex in months, and she assumed I'd be thrilled with her leftovers. The arrogance of it all made my head spin. I had 2 days to figure out what to do. They called it an intervention, but I'd make sure it ended on my terms. All weekend, I played through scenario after scenario. Did I even want to save my marriage? I wasn't sure when we got married. It felt like we had everything. Tracy was my best friend, my confidant, and my lover. But things had changed. Maybe that's just how it goes. Maybe I had an unrealistic idea of what marriage should be. But I couldn't let Michael take her from me, even if I didn't want her anymore. I wasn't about to let him win. I was ready for it on Monday, just after lunch. Tracy called. "Hey, Tracy," I answered. "Everything okay? You never call me at work." "Hi, honey," she replied. I wondered if she called Michael that too. "Nothing urgent, just wanted to make sure you'd be home on time tonight. I need to talk to you about something important." "Oh, good," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "I've got some news for you too. I'll be home around 5. At 5:15, I got a call from work." She was trying to find out some news. I said, "I'll tell you tonight." I had to wrap up a report, so I told her I'd see her at home. Then I went to tell my boss I'd be taking the rest of the day off. He didn't mind, so I had time to get ready for what was coming at 5:15. 26. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I heard the garage door open. I'd opened a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and had 2 glasses ready on the counter. My heart was pounding with anger, just below the surface. But I kept calm. A couple of minutes later, the door swung open and Tracy walked in alone, dropping her keys and purse on the table with a careless toss. I was relieved Michael wasn't with her. That would have made things even messier. I gave her a smile and said, "Hey, sweetheart." She'd asked earlier that day if we should take a quick break before we talk or jump right into it. I could tell she was a bit thrown by my eagerness to get straight to business. I could tell she'd expected some delay, maybe hoping we'd ease into the conversation later, but I wasn't about to give her that control. I wanted to keep her on edge and make sure she wasn't prepared for what was coming. She had likely rehearsed everything she planned to say, so I aimed to disrupt that. But yeah, let's get it over with," she replied, a little uneasy as she sat down across from me. "If it's all the same to you, I'd like to go first." "Not at all," I replied, not giving her much choice in the matter. Sure," she responded, clearly hesitant. I offered, grabbing the bottle before she could answer. I poured a glass for each of us, sliding one across the table to her. She picked it up and, after a heavy sigh, gulped down half of it in one go. I topped it off the second she set it down. "I've been thinking about." I started off by saying that I wasn't going to beat around the bush. There was no point in dragging this out. I let the silence hang in the air, drawing her attention. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on me, her posture stiff with anticipation. "What is it?" she asked, sounding more curious than worried at first. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice flat and firm. The words took a moment to sink in. I could see the confusion flash across her face, quickly followed by shock. Her mind was scrambling, trying to process. I could see her mind racing as she processed what I'd said. She was probably thinking about Michael, wondering if I knew about him. "But why?" "I didn't love you anymore," I replied, watching as the weight of those words hit her like a punch to the gut. "You don't love me," she repeated, her voice cracking slightly, struggling to grasp my meaning. "I stopped loving you a while ago, Tracy," I said, lying. I knew exactly when I'd fallen out of love, but I didn't feel the need to. I'd ignored it for as long as I could, but recently it became impossible to deny. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" She was teetering on the edge of tears, and her reaction caught me off guard. "Do you remember when we first got married?" I asked, softening my tone just a bit. "We were inseparable. We spent every spare moment together, going to the store, the movies, the mall. It didn't matter what we were doing. We just wanted to be around each other. She nodded, her expression distant. Yeah, I remember. She said quietly, we both worked, but we'd always make time to have lunch together at least a couple of times a week. When the day was over, we couldn't wait to get home, kiss each other, and more often than not, make love. We shared hobbies too. You dragged me to those pottery classes. I smiled slightly at the memory. I thought you hated pottery. She said, staring at me like she was trying to figure out where I was going with this. It wasn't about the pottery. It was about doing something with you. I told her I loved seeing how passionate you were about it, and I enjoyed being a part of that even if I didn't care much for the craft itself. The same goes for those Christmas village houses we painted together. It was tedious, but we did it as a team. Yours always turned out better than mine. I nodded. I remember all those nights we sat at the table painting those little shingles. I loved every second of it. We were so close back then. Tracy's face dropped a bit, and her posture slumped. My love hasn't dried up, she muttered defensively. I ignored that and kept going. I knew you were jealous of us. We were that couple who did everything together. If I had to run to the hardware store, you'd come along. If you went shopping for clothes, I trailed behind you, waiting outside the dressing room. Yes, but you hated it. She interrupted. You were always on your phone, not paying attention. I didn't care what you bought. I thought you looked great in anything. I said I just wanted to be there with you. I could have stayed home and watched sports, but I didn't. I chose to be with you. Her eyes glistened a bit. I could see she was holding back. Remember how all the women in the neighborhood would get together for bingo or those bachelorette parties, but you never joined them? Do you remember how the neighborhood would get together for bingo or those bachelorette parties, but you never joined them? Tracy wiped a tear from her cheek and nodded. Yeah, I remember you always said you didn't want to waste time with the chickens. I continued, you could have been hanging out with me instead. Instead, remember all those nights we cuddled under the covers and watched You've Got Mail? I love that movie. She whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We must have seen it 100 times. I said, pouring more wine into her glass, I still want to watch it with you. Tracy exclaimed, her voice cracking. I never. I wanted this. I thought we'd grow old together. Take cooking classes, try ballroom dancing, or just stay in bed reading books. I don't want a divorce. I met her eyes, holding her gaze, but we've drifted apart. Tracy, I don't even know when it really started. I said softly, we used to eat out a few times, eh? You used to go out to lunch with me all the time. But then you started saying you didn't have time. That wasn't true. You still found time to have lunch, just not with me. She flinched at that, but I didn't stop. Before I knew it, we stopped eating together altogether. I started going out with my coworkers. I started spending time with the workers, and I have to admit, I enjoyed their company. Maybe even more than I should have. That part wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't about to make her feel defensive. I didn't want this to turn into a shouting match. Not yet. Then, coming home early to spend time together stopped matching as much. We both stayed at work longer, and by the time we got home, we were distant and distracted. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked. Her voice was small. If I'd known, I would have told you. I should have made more of an effort. I should have worked less. You're right. I agreed, even though I'd brought it up countless times. I just didn't understand why being with me wasn't important to you. Maybe if I had, I could have changed something, done something to make you want to spend more time with me. I failed in that. I could see she was starting to feel guilty, which was exactly where I needed her to be before I dropped the real bomb. If I led with Michael, she just got defensive, and it would have led to a fight. I wanted her to think about what she'd wrecked before I brought it up. We stopped doing almost everything together. I kept doing the same things, while you started going to bachelorette parties and I went to poker nights. You spent weekends at the spa while I played golf. We hardly talked about anything, and our sex life suffered. We were either too tired or I just wasn't in the mood, Tracy said, staring down at her glass. I thought you didn't want it anymore, she added quietly, her voice laced with uncertainty. I had no clue where she'd gotten that idea, I replied. Maybe she was just trying to justify her own actions. Oh, God, no, I said with a bitter laugh. I never stopped wanting intimacy. I'm just as horny as I was 10 years ago. I just stopped wanting you. That hit her hard. She probably convinced herself that I was the one pulling away, but here I was. I told her that I didn't want her anymore. If I wasn't so hurt, I might have found it funny. She choked out her voice, barely a whisper. She hadn't expected that you didn't want to be with me anymore. I said flatly, I lost interest. You were like a cold fish. You just lie there, never wanting to try anything new or even remotely exciting. It always felt like you just wanted to get it over with so you could go back to whatever you were doing before knitting. I still wanted those weekend sex marathons like we used to have. You didn't even care about having an orgasm. It got so bad that toward the end I faked it just to be done with it. Tracy's eyes widened. She said, You didn't. Her voice was rising. You came inside me. I shook my head. The memory of it was almost laughable now. I remember you insisted I use condoms. You were on birth control, but you said it was easier to clean up that way so you wouldn't have to deal with it. The aftermath of our encounter left a mess for hours. I told you I hated condoms, but you didn't care. You never checked the condoms, so it was easy for me to fake it. I just grunted, rolled off, and tossed the empty one in the trash. What? She yelled, utterly horrified. I took a slow sip of my wine, watching her face crumble. I'm sorry, Tracy, I said. That's just how it was. She sat there stunned, her face flushed red. Whether it was from anger, embarrassment, or something else, I couldn't tell. I refilled her glass, and she downed a big gulp. It was only a matter of time before we both started looking elsewhere for someone who excited us. I wasn't talking about me, but she didn't know that. Are you cheating on me? Tracy suddenly snapped. Her voice was filled with anger. Is there someone else you're in love with? Tracy, you know how I feel about cheating. I made a vow when we got married, and I take that seriously. You know how my first wife betrayed me with a coworker, just like your ex. Your husband cheated on you. I'd never do that to you, and I trust you wouldn't hurt me like that. Her face softened and she looked down. How could you think I'd do that? She mumbled, I'm sorry. After a moment, she added, You're right. I know you wouldn't. Her hands were trembling, and she couldn't meet my eyes. The guilt was radiating off her, clear as day. Let's not wait for the divorce to finally sleep together. I told her I had someone new in my life, which brings me to my real news. I've already spoken to my lawyer, and the papers are ready. You'll be served by Friday. She gasped and her eyes widened as panic crept into her voice. I said, You'll be served with divorce papers on Friday. I repeated calmly, doing my best to suppress a smile. It's for the best, really. This way, you'll have your freedom, and so will I. We can admit the last 10 years was a mistake, and we need to move on. It wasn't a mistake to me, though. She whispered, desperation creeping into her tone. Come on, Tracy. You've known for a long time that this wasn't working. Be honest with yourself. You haven't really wanted to be with me for ages. Our marriage was a mistake from the start. I'm not who you want. You're wrong. She objected, her voice rising in frustration. I want to stay married to you, but I don't love you anymore. I said it coldly, and in this state, it's a no-fault divorce, so we'll split everything 50-50ths. One of us could get more if we could prove adultery, but none of us have cheated yet, right? So it's a clean break. I think that's fair. I've already set up a meeting at the bank tomorrow to divide our accounts. We'll need new ones. She also needed new credit cards and to switch the utilities over. The realtor is coming Wednesday to list the house. She was moving way too fast. She cried, her voice cracking. She didn't know what to do. Please slow down, she begged. Don't worry, I've already packed my things. I'll be staying at a hotel until I find something more permanent. You can stay here until we sell the house. Stop, she yelled. Panic in her voice. Please stop. There's no reason to delay this, Tracy. We have to take care of everything before Friday, right? Her face twisted in confusion. Why Friday? What's so important about Friday? Well, Friday is the day you're supposed to meet up with Michael. That's when you two are planning your little hotel stay, isn't it? Her face went pale, her eyes wide as they darted back and forth. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a soft hiss of, "Oh, I think I might have messed up the date," I asked, reaching for the folder I tucked under a pile of magazines. I pulled out the private investigator summary and slid it across the table, pointing to the part where her plans with Michael were outlined. Actually, you and Michael have a reservation at the Gaylord, Texas for Friday night. That's not what it looks like. Is that where we're going with this? I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. Do I need to show you the pictures of you two kissing at lunch? Her eyes widened again, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned back in my chair, a smirk creeping across my face. Now I remember exactly when I stopped loving you. It was the day I found out you were planning to turn me into a cuckold just like my ex. Wife, I'm sorry, honey. She blurted out, her voice cracking. I don't love Michael. It's just a fling, something to spice things up for us. I was going to spend the night with him, but then we could spend the whole weekend together, just like we used to. Michael said you'd like it, that it would turn you on and revive our relationship, revive our sex life. How does that make any sense? Tracy stammered, unable to get a coherent sentence out. No, but she shifted tactics quickly. Michael told me, you'd agree to it if you wanted me to be happy. I want you to be happy, Tracy. I said my tone was icy, but I want you to be happy with me, not with another man. What made you think I'd ever be okay with this? You should know how I feel about infidelity. Yes, but Tracy. Her voice trembled as she scrambled for an excuse. It wasn't infidelity, she said. I mean, not really. It's not cheating if you gave me permission. Not in this lifetime, I replied, cutting her off. She looked away, shame creeping into her features. I see that now. I should have known better from the start. I don't even know what was going through my head. I guess I was just feeling empty. Michael made me feel alive again. Empty? I scoffed. How could you be empty when we were supposed to be happy? We were still building a life together, weren't we? Her voice wavered. I don't know, but think about it. I interrupted, leaning in. You felt empty because you created that distance. You pulled away from me. You stopped coming to lunch. You stopped doing the things we used to love. You made the choice to shut me out. And then you turned to Michael. So if you were lonely, that's on you, Tracy. You made your bed. She blinked, clearly shaken. I didn't do that on purpose. I wouldn't have. She trailed off, searching for something to hold on to. I thought you were the one pulling away. Don't you remember? You kept saying you were too busy. And that last time we were supposed to meet for lunch, you didn't show. You texted me to go without you. After that, I stopped trying. And you never even noticed. She stared at her hands. Her voice dropping. I guess you didn't. I guess I was losing you. Either way, I felt a surge of anger. You made your choice, Tracy. You were all wrapped up in yourself and Michael. Well, now you can have him. Her head snapped up. I don't want him. She blurted, her voice sharp. I want you. I want us. I was wrong. I gave up. I know that now, but I don't want to lose you. It's too late, I said flatly, refusing to soften. We're past that. No, it's not too late. She practically screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of her desperation. I didn't sleep with him. I swear I'll never see him again. I'll quit my job if I have to. We can fix this. You've already crossed the line. I said coldly, my voice laced with bitterness. You betrayed me in every way that matters except one, and that's the most important. Part of it is that we didn't have sex. I was confused and didn't think straight. I didn't love Michael. It was a stupid crush. I got caught up in it, but it's over now. Please don't leave me. It's not that simple. Why can't it be? She begged, her tears flowing freely. You know, you stopped me before it went too far. But it already did. I said, my tone was firm and unyielding. Just because you didn't sleep with him doesn't mean you didn't betray me. We were just friends. She said in a strangled voice. You should have been friends with me. I shot back, the anger I'd been holding back slipping through. I have plenty of friends, but I don't kiss them. I don't hide things from you, and I sure as hell don't plan to sleep with them. Her shoulders shook as she dropped her head into her hands and sobbed. I swear I'll never take you for granted again. Please, can't you see this for what it is? It was a huge mistake. Can't you forgive me just this once? I let the silence stretch out before finally answering. This isn't some game where you get a do-over. Tracy, this wasn't a simple mistake. You walked away from what we had and gave your heart to someone else. Her voice, hoarse from crying. Michael never had my heart. My heart was always yours. Yet you were ready to give him your body. But I didn't. She sobbed. You stopped me. Shouldn't I mean? Is that all it is to you, Tracy? Do you think I don't matter at all? Her response came in a broken whisper. You mean everything to me. I fight anyone for you. I die for you. But now, I wouldn't even lift a finger to help you if you were on fire. She screamed. Her throat, her hands grabbing at my arms, pulling me toward her. No, please don't say that. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please believe me. I pulled back. My voice calm but hard. I believe you're sorry. I can see that, but it doesn't change what's already done. I don't love you anymore. You anymore. This is over. She crumpled in on herself, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, she whispered. Please don't leave me. I'm not leaving you, Tracy. You made this choice. Maybe in time, I'll forgive you, but that doesn't change the fact that I don't love you anymore. Her sobs grew louder, and I replied coldly, besides, you still have Michael to comfort you. Michael is married. She managed to choke out through her sobs. He never wanted a relationship, he just wanted sex. I let out a dark chuckle. Well, maybe his plans have changed. I'm sure of it. His wife had a lot to say when he got home. She and I used the same divorce attorney. Her eyes widened in shock. I slid the folder across the table, watching her pale as I spoke. Everything's in there, the investigator's full report, pictures of you and Michael, and the divorce papers. His wife has a copy too. I suggest you take a good look. No, please, she whimpered. Her voice was barely audible. Please don't do this. If you want to come with me to the bank tomorrow to settle the accounts, give me a call. I stood up. I made up my mind and left the house, leaving her sobs behind me as I stepped into the cool night air. Tracy was trying to come to terms with the divorce. I didn't want to get dragged into a long, messy, and expensive legal fight, so when the judge suggested we try marriage counseling, I figured it was worth a shot. I was surprised at how well the counseling sessions worked. We dug deep into our feelings, talked openly about everything, and left judgment at the door. Tracy finally understood how she had let things get out of control. Michael had really got into her head and nearly destroyed our marriage. I was able to talk about the pain and humiliation I had been carrying. The counselor seemed genuinely impressed with how far we had come after a few sessions. I moved back into the house. The sex was electric, hot, and intense, and frequent. Tracy was eager to please and willing to do anything I asked. We reconnected in every sense of the word. A year later, it felt like we were back to where we had been when we first got married. Tracy had quit her old job and started. We drove to and from work together and had lunch every day, not because we felt like we had to, but because we genuinely wanted to be in each other's company. We started doing almost everything together again. We put up a small Christmas tree and finished painting the 2 pictures we'd abandoned years ago. We even signed up for another ceramics class and, on a whim, decided to take ballroom dancing lessons one day while rummaging through some old boxes. I found the set of colored pens we used to love, much to my amazement. They hadn't dried out after all. Then one cozy night, as we snuggled under a blanket sharing a bowl of popcorn and watching You've Got Mail for what felt like the 1000th time, Tracy kissed me and whispered, "Honey, I need to talk to you about something important." I noticed the tears welling up in her eyes, and I got really nervous. My heart started racing, and I felt a tightness in my stomach, thinking about what she might say. But before I could react, Tracy spoke again. Her voice was soft but steady. "You're going to be a daddy," she said. I felt relief and joy wash over me. She wiped the tears from her cheeks and, in my best Tom Hanks impression, said, "Don't cry, shopgirl. This is good news." Tracy smiled through her tears and laughed. "I guess I'm just obsessed with happy endings."